First, happy birthday to you, President Donald J. Trump. You've been an extraordinary leader, decisive, courageous, clear vision, clear action. You have done great things for Israel. You've been an extraordinary friend to the Jewish state and to me personally. We've known each other for many years, and we appreciate what you're doing now, helping protect Israeli lives against the criminal regime in Iran. Today, Israel is defending freedom in the Middle East and beyond. We're doing so against a tyrannical and radical Iranian regime that wants to build atomic bombs to destroy us and wants to build ballistic missiles, including intercontinental ballistic missile, to be able to threaten anyone and everywhere in the world. By defending ourselves, we're also defending others. We're defending our Arab neighbors, our Arab friends in peace. We're defending Europe. We're helping defend also the United States, which helps us all the time in our defense. This is an important mission.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's special stream. Today is Sunday, and I don't usually do streams on Saturdays and Sundays. However, it's very important to shed light on the ongoing current of affairs in West Asia, Middle East, especially with the current tit for tat exchanges between Israel and Iran. If you listen to the Israeli side, they are defending freedoms, guys. They're defending not only their freedoms, they're defending my freedom, basically in the neighboring country, Syria. They're defending the freedoms in Europe. They're defending the freedoms in the United States. They're basically just an innocent political system in Israel which wants nothing but live side by side in peace and harmony with their neighbors. And if you say otherwise, you are an anti-Semite. So be careful with that. Let's put the sarcasm aside and let's also little bit clean the dust over all this hype regarding the hype and the sensations and the wishful thinkings and the wishful analysis surrounding the ongoing war of Israel and the United States against Iran. I would like to say very clearly that I don't support and I don't endorse any military activity against any country. And of course, I don't support the killing of innocent people. On this channel, I analyze the ongoing geopolitical conflicts. Therefore, there are going to be few harsh analyses, and this analysis represent the owners, those who have posted them. Myself, I'm going to try to analyze what is going on now in the Middle East. And I will start by saying that Iran is not in the best position. Now, many people will come and say, Kevork, what are you saying? Iran is hammering Israel. Iran is sending ballistic missiles, hypersonic missiles, and you're correct. And you are correct. However, Iran is mistaken to think that Israel wants tit-for-tat conflict with Tehran. Iran has received a major escalation from the Israeli side. represented by targeted assassinations of over 20 senior Iranian generals, officers, scientists, professors. They have targeted and assassinated them inside Iran, which means the intelligence operation was successful. So when the ceiling of Israel is here, and they have conducted a multi-layered operation inside Iran, when the retaliation of Iran is by firing ballistic missiles, but not matching the initial attack of Israel, which means Iran has not yet assassinated or killed any of the senior officials in Israel, and it has not shown that it is interested in a brutal and open-ended war, just like they did during the war between Iraq and Iran, which means we're going to the end, right? Up until this moment, the Iranians have shown a certain level of restraint, and this is the trap that the Israelis have set for the Iranians. And if the situation continues like this, which means if Israel and the United States control the tempo of the escalatory dominance, Iran will always try to match them, but Israel will always be above. And we have learned in the past 1.5 to 2 years by watching and following the military patterns in the region, especially in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Syria, that when Israel sees that your retaliation and reaction doesn't meet the same level of the action and the aggression and the strikes and the attacks that they have conducted against another country, they will go further and further and further, which means deterrence will be lost. This is the most important thing in today's conversation, guys, or today's stream with you, and that is deterrence, deterrence, deterrence. If a country A attacks a country B and assassinates 20 senior officials in the country, and this country sees that the retaliation doesn't match the attack that they have conducted against them, this means that the deterrence is lost, and this country will dare to attack again and again and again. And this means if Iran's attacks now, I'm watching them, they're harsh attacks against military installations, vital interests, etc. But if you see what Iran is doing, Iran is waiting for Israel to take an action, for example, to hit an oil refinery, to hit a port, a seaport, etc. And then Iran retaliates, which means the escalatory dominance is in the hands of the Americans and the Israelis, and this is what they want. There is a false perception surrounding this conflict now in West Asia, and that is this war is about the nuclear program of Iran. And I would argue and say the nuclear program of Iran is only one component of this war. The main issue with Iran is not only the nuclear reactor or the nuclear program. The main issue is the existence of a political regime or a political system that is anti-American, anti-Israeli, and resists the American and Israeli dominance on the region. Which means whether Iran has a nuclear program or not, Iran will continue posing a threat to the American and Israeli dominance over West Asia and the Middle East. And there is one very serious issue here, that is China. China, China, China. There are many voices whispering in the ears of Donald Trump, telling him, what are we doing in Ukraine? This is a wrong strategy. We shouldn't go into hot war against Russia, because our initial strategy in the 70s and the 80s, which was the Kissinger strategy, Nixon and Kissinger, they have developed a strategy which turned the communist China against Soviet Union. They always said that it is important and it is vital to keep these two powers away from each other. And if these two powers come together, they will pose a serious threat to our global hegemonic status. And therefore, when we see the might of China, the might of Russia, and the might of Iran, and we calculate them all on a balance and try to balance the power between the US and these rising powers, we will notice that the only country which has military and economic, both economic, which is very important, military and economic might capable of challenging the United States in a serious manner is China. Russia is capable of challenging the United States militarily, but not economically. China is the only country capable of challenging the United States on both levels. Therefore, the so-called theorists or the strategists in the United States who want to keep the US as a dominant power, they're telling Trump that he has to freeze the conflict in Ukraine and focus on China. China is the imminent and existential, is the imminent threat to our dominance on the world. It's not a threat against the United States. China is not a threat against the United States. It is a threat against the dominance of the United States, against the hegemonic status of the United States. But the Americans also know that going into a war against China is not a journey. China is a very powerful and capable military and economy. And going in a hot war against China is not going to be easy at all. And I doubt personally that the United States would emerge victorious in the broader sense or in the classical sense in a direct war with China. So how can they harm China immensely to the extent that they could slow down the Chinese economic development? Now, China is, of course, self-sufficient in many aspects. However, they need a huge amount of oil and fuel from the Middle East. And one of the countries which sells most of its fuel and gas to China is Iran. Therefore, the goal in Iran is not only the nuclear program of Iran, it is also regime change in Iran. And those are two different things. Because the current political system in Iran could say, okay, I will agree to your conditions and to your terms, and I will disable or stop uranium enrichment, right? The Americans will not stop there. We have already seen this movie before. We've seen it in Syria, when Syria destroyed its WMDs. And we have seen it, WMDs meaning the chemical program, and we have seen it in Libya. Both of these countries disarmed themselves, and the United States didn't stop there. And they came after them, and they managed to oust their leaders and destroy their countries. Therefore, even if Iran accepts to dismantle its nuclear program, the Americans and the Israelis will not stop there as long as the current, what they call a regime, exists. And I don't want to use the term regime from now on, just for you to know, the Iranian government, okay? I'm just saying between quotations or between brackets. And therefore, from the retaliation, when I'm judging the retaliations or evaluating the retaliation of Iran, I don't see personally that they're able or their response could deter the Israelis from continuing and conducting more strikes on Iranian interests with the hope that a regime change would happen. These attacks against the senior officers was like a shockwave, right, in Iran. And they are betting now there would be a destabilization, domestic destabilization, including supporting some militant groups like Mujahidi Khalq, MEK, and other probably Kurdish or Azeri groups in order to start a civil war, an insurgency against the current government in Iran. Therefore, the Americans and the Israelis are very, very serious, and they're determined, and they're executing their plan. And I'm not here trying to terrify anyone or scaremongering or anything. I'm just explaining and analyzing from the 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 patterns of the Israeli policy making in the past 2 to 3 years, and they're copying the same thing now in Iran. So if Iran doesn't change its military strategy now with Israel, Israel will continue having its escalatory dominance over Iran, and this is very, very, very dangerous, and it could lead into Iranian defeat, like it led into defeat of other players in the axis of resistance, or what used to be called an axis of resistance in other regions, such as in Syria and in Lebanon. So this would be my personal analysis of the military situation now in West Asia. But let's go further. I have found a brilliant analysis today. This is an analysis. Of course, some of the words used in this post, it represents the author. However, I want you to understand the core of this analysis that I'm going to show you now, which is it goes in line with my personal analysis in this case. We have to understand, guys, that this is not about only the nuclear program. Israel has decided to assassinate Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei to try to cause total state collapse. Unless Iran establishes deterrence in the very short term by striking both Israeli and US assets in the region and eliminating top figures in the Israeli regime, they will proceed. The US and Israel didn't launch this war to try to eliminate the nuclear sites. They know they can't. They are too well protected and dispersed, and any damage can be reconstituted in the short term or reconstructed. They launched it to cause total state collapse in Iran, beginning in phases. The first phase was to eliminate the top military and IRGC leaders while also going after scientists and mass killing civilians in the process. This would create the false impression that they are still somewhat restrained and focused on military and nuclear targets. Now, after taking what they expect will be a similarly constrained response from Iran, they will see that as confirmation that Iran will not adhere to its own stated red lines and is still afraid of meeting Israel at the same level of escalation. That is their green light to proceed to the next phase, which is to target and kill top political leaders, including Khamenei. Their hope isn't to replace the current government and state with some rehash of the monarchist Zionist fascist through his failed son, he means this Riza Pahlavi. They know there is no base of support of that inside the country. Their hope is to do another Libya and Syria, unleash proxy forces they fund and arm together with the Gulf Arab Shield puppet regimes and NATO Erdogan and turn it into a spiral of death and chaos. A concocted civil war where Iranians are paid and armed by the CIA and Mossad to kill Iranians. The MEK, which is the Mujahidi Khalq, and other such proxy forces have already been trained and prepared and are ready to be activated. They will begin with car bombings and terrorist attacks, mass killing civilians. ISIS will reappear again and do its typical job for the CIA Mossad masters. The US and Israel decided to launch this war since before Trump was elected, and it has the full and total support of the entire US military intelligence industrial complex and the media and political class. Both Republicans and Democrats, and it would have also happened if Kamala Harris won the election. They see Iran and the axis of resistance as its alliance with Russia and China as the main obstacle to full and total Zionist US NATO Israeli imperial hegemony in the region and by extension the world. And they want to destroy it as it is the only one that, unlike Russia and China, doesn't have a nuclear deterrent, and they want to get it before it obtains it. This is an existential war of survival, not just for the Iranian state, but for Iran as a nation. If this project succeeds, the country will be balkanized, ethnic divisions will be steered by foreign actors, the CIA and Mossad and the Gulf puppets will fund and arm dozens of proxy deaths and rape squads, roaming their fiefdoms. Tens of millions of lives will be destroyed. Everything must be done to prevent this. Iran has the weapon to do so. It has the capacity to do so. It is only a question of will. Does it have the will to do what it takes to prevent the mass destruction of their own people and nation? I hope it does. We must all hope it does. Look at this brilliant analysis that he brings into the context of the war against Iran. I think this account is managed by a woman. I'm not sure, but I saw some people were addressing the profile with a she, and I'm very impressed by this analysis, to be honest with you. So Zay's Curl, or whoever behind this profile, says, all of this goes back to the assassination of Nasrallah. Israel had the ability to assassinate him whenever it wanted. This is not the question. Iran can assassinate Netanyahu if it wants. Ukraine can assassinate Putin. Putin can assassinate Zelensky. Assassinations are not the problem. Every state with a barely competent intelligence has the capacity to assassinate anyone. It is a question of deterrence. Deterrence, guys. The reason Israel didn't assassinate Nasrallah is because, as Gallant later came out and admitted, because they were deadly afraid of the response by Hezbollah and Iran. They thought it would lead to such a significant response, not just in terms of a missile strike on Israeli territory hitting military infrastructure, but assassinations of top Israeli officials, that they didn't go ahead with it. Then, slowly but surely, the deterrence Iran had established was broken down. Look at the timeline. 1st of April 2024, Israel attacks Iran's embassy in Damascus, killing many officials. The 13th of April, Iran responds with Operation True Promise 1, which was a symbolic pre-signaled strike. No deaths, just some limited material damage. 19th of May, Israel kills Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi and the Foreign Minister Amir Abdullahian, which I totally believe they were assassinated and killed. I totally agree with this account. Iran responds by covering it up and going along with the lie that it was just an accident so that it could avoid having to retaliate at all. Israeli officials were openly gloating about these killings, and it's an open secret in intel circles that they were assassinated. July 30, Israel kills top Hezbollah military official Fuad Shukr. July 31, Israel kills Hamas leader Haniyeh inside Iran and does it in Tehran itself. Iran then vowed they would retaliate, but genocide Joe and Blinken began the fake diplomacy propaganda that Trump Witkoff also initiated ahead of the current war, saying they would get a permanent ceasefire in Gaza as long as they didn't retaliate. On the 17th and 18th of September, Israel does its terrorist pager attack in Lebanon, killing and blinding many, including toddlers and children. Already before this, they had begun bombing Beirut, which Hezbollah and Nasrallah said was a red line. Israel saw all this as confirmation that there would be no retaliation by Iran and Hezbollah of the same kind, meaning the direct targeting and mass killing of top Israeli officials and any human shields who they happened to be hiding amongst at the time. This was the green light to go ahead with the assassination of Nasrallah on September 27th. By that point, it was already too late. All of Iran and the broader axis of resistance deterrence capacity had already been totally shattered. They kept saying in words, we will strike you at least as hard as you struck us, if not harder, and then they kept not following through on their own stated red lines. Nasrallah's assassination was when the US and Israel knew that the war on Iran they had already wanted to launch all along was now ready to go in the short term, which means within a year. Iran then did retaliate to all this on October 1st, Operation True Promise 2, which did actually do some significant damage, although the Western media class deliberately lies about this, but it was limited to military infrastructure. It didn't meet the same level of the Israeli attacks, not even close to it. No top Israeli officials were eliminated, no targeted assassinations, no human shields that they were hiding amongst were taken out. All deterrence was completely lost at this point. Just think about it from the US-Israeli perspective. You killed Nasrallah, the main leader of the axis of resistance, alongside, probably in the future, Khamenei himself, and the only cost you had to bear was some material damage. Why would they not happily take that exchange? Of course they would. They love that exchange ratio. They would take that deal any day. It's like the perfect gift to them. And now they're coming in for the final kill with the exact same standard they have been applying all this time, beginning with the assassination of top military and IRGC officials and scientists, and any civilians who may be around them, taking hits that consist primarily of material damage, which they love. That's a perfect exchange for them. And then they move to the next phase, the supreme leader of Iran and the axis of resistance itself. The only way to stop this now is to break this cycle. And the only way this can be done is by hitting them and doing minimally the same damage to them that was done by them. And ideally going beyond that. In fact, far beyond that. You have to look completely insane and unpredictable. You have to come over as totally irrational, capable of destroying the entire region if necessary. In other words, you have to make them fear you, just as the genocidal Israeli death cult and the US have done for themselves. First, eliminate top Israeli military and political officials, any human shields they are hiding amongst with them. It is not a matter of being able to. Of course, Iran is able to. It is a question of will. Second, target US and Israeli military assets everywhere in the region, and not just infrastructure, not just buildings. It can't just be buildings. Third, close the Strait of Hormuz and begin striking oil fields in the Arab Shield Gulf puppet regimes. All of this has to be done, and then the scale can be increased if deterrence has not yet been established and the war continues. This is the only way the genocidal Israeli and US death cults can be brought to heel, and tens of millions of lives can be saved. Now, as I mentioned, I'm not endorsing here attacks against any country, but we're talking logically about the concept of deterrence, which, in my opinion, Iran has not re-established yet. It was unheard before the assassination of Haniyeh for Israel to conduct such operations inside Iran. And then also we had the assassination before that, the killings of Raisi and Amir Abdullahian, which in my opinion highly likely were assassinations. So now that Iran hasn't responded back then in a proper manner, in the same extent that the Israelis have hit them, then the Israelis have taken that as a green light to come after more officials and more officials and more officials inside Iran. And in this case, I don't want to say, like, I'm not someone who is like calling for, nuclear Armageddon or nuclear for Iran to develop any WMDs. This is for the Iranian government and for the Iranian people to decide. But the only way now to deter regime change, this integration of the Iran as a nation, it's either they're going to go into huge conventional war against all the US and Israeli assets in the region, because US is part of this war. And we will come to that now later, because the title of this video is whether the US will join this war. The US is already in a war against Iran. So the Iranians have the choice to strike the assets of the Israelis and the US in the region in a very harsh manner by using conventional weapons, or they have to go nuclear. Now, what is the issue with the nuclear? Can they deter attacks against them if it's going to go nuclear, right? And will a nuclear Iran a good news for the Middle East?
I think there's no question that a nuclear-armed Iran would bring stability to the region, because nuclear weapons are weapons of peace. They're weapons of deterrence. They have hardly any offensive capability at all. And if Iran had a nuclear deterrent, there's no way that the United States or Israel, for that matter, would be threatening to attack Iran now. In the same way that if Saddam had had nuclear weapons in 2003, the United States would not have invaded Iraq. And if Libya had nuclear weapons in 2011, the United States would not have gone to war against Libya. So I think that if you had a Middle East where other states besides Israel, and this of course includes Iran, had a nuclear deterrent, it would be a more peaceful region. Well,
so do you agree with Professor Mearsheimer that if Iran had nukes, it would be a more peaceful region? Yesterday or the day before, when we had a conversation with our friend Dr. Tarek Chibil Amar, I showed you an article from Haaretz. It's a story of how Syria tried to develop a nuclear reactor and was destroyed by Israel. I believe that if Syria had a nuclear weapon, all this war the CIA started in 2011, Operation Timber-Sicker, would not have happened. Syria had a less effective weapon, the chemical weapons, and they did the false flag attack inside Syria in August 2013 in order to invite foreign intervention by accusing the former Assad government, saying Assad used chemical weapons against its own people, and now we have to intervene because he's using WMDs. But the truth of the matter is this was a false flag operation done by probably multiple intelligence apparatuses, which includes, of course, the UK, the US, and Turkey, in order to accuse the Syrian government and then come after the Syrian government and take away the WMDs. And this was a time when Russia played a mediator role again between the US and Syria, and they have persuaded and urged Syria to give up their chemical weapons. And what happened after that? They accelerated. This is the thing I'm trying to say, guys. Even if Iran gives up its nuclear program, they will come after Iran. They will continue coming after Iran. They will not stop. But then Iran will be more exposed without nukes or without nuclear program. And in Syria, when they took away the chemical weapons from Syria, what happened in 2013 when they took away Syria's chemical weapons? They unleashed ISIS, because until 2013, ISIS was not a considerable or considerably powerful force in Syria. It was mostly Al-Qaeda, the offshoot of Al-Qaeda in Syria called Al-Nusra Front, whose leader is Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, who is now the current self-selected president of Syria, endorsed and normalized and supported by the collective West and NATO and Israel and Turkey. Therefore, when Assad gave up the chemical weapons, they continued coming after him and accelerated the regime change war against him, and they started unleashing ISIS against him in 2014 and 2015. And you remember what happened to Syria. So I'm saying if Iran now abandons its nuclear program, it's going to be the end for Iran for sure, 100%, in a matter of months. And this is not something I'm trying to, scaremonger or fearmonger. This is not my job. I'm just analyzing. For example, this is coming from Wall Street Journal. Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei not off limits, Israeli officials tell Wall Street Journal. An Israeli official told the Wall Street Journal on Saturday that Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei is not off limits in Israel's ongoing efforts to dismantle Iran's nuclear program, which is, of course, a lie. They're not trying to do that. They're trying to do regime change. This is what the media does, right? This statement underscores Israel's strategy, which goes beyond neutralizing Iran's nuclear assets and extends to undermining the political and military pillars of the regime. Yes, that's true. Israel has already claimed responsibility for the deaths of 9 scientists instrumental in Iran's nuclear program, as well as senior Iranian generals. At the same time, Netanyahu comes and makes this video statement in which he reiterates and says that in the near future, you will see Israeli planes, the Israeli Air Force, our pilots over the skies of Tehran. We will strike every site and every target of Ayatollah's regime. I thought this is only about the nuclear program, right? Why would they strike also other government posts in this case if the issue is only with the nuclears? But Netanyahu is telling us we have dealt a very severe blow to Iran's main enrichment site, and if necessary, we will also hit it again, he says. The Iranian dictator is turning Iran's citizens into hostages and creating a reality in which they, especially the residents of Tehran, will pay a heavy price for the criminal attacks on Israeli civilians. So what basically Netanyahu is saying, we're going to bomb the hell out of Tehran soon. We will kill hundreds and probably thousands of civilians, and we will say, this is a retaliation. This is a response. You attacked us. But the truth is, it's Israel who started attacking Iran in this case. And when I say the issue is, the main goal is regime change, I truly mean it. Like today I saw this posts by, his name is Ma'ir Masri, and he's a professor, lecturer at Hebrew University. And also he was a former Israeli officer. He says, we will overthrow the Iranian regime just like we overthrew Bashar al-Assad. What? So he's basically confessing and telling us the truth about the regime change operation in Syria. And I said in Arabic, شكرا على الاعتراف بأن إسرائيل ساهمت في سقوط بشار الأسد وإيصال الجولاني إلى السلطة. I wrote him, thank you for acknowledging that Israel contributed to the fall of Bashar al-Assad and the rise of Jolani to power. So this is a guy who is who lives in Jerusalem, who has a big following, 147,000, and he says he's a doctor of geopolitics, lecturer at Hebrew University, and he's a military reservist. And he's saying we will overthrow the Iranian regime, just like we brought down Bashar al-Assad. I think everything is clear, right? And this is not only his words. Of course, Netanyahu back then, he also made a video statement, basically, acknowledging and confessing Israel's role in overthrowing Assad by blocking the Iranian military help, which was coming to support the embattled back then President Bashar al-Assad. Take a look.
The collapse, the removal of Nasrallah really broke the axis. It was a terrific blow. Some people are irreplaceable. And so far, he's been irreplaceable. And so, having delivered that blow to Hezbollah, we also delivered a blow to Assad, because Assad was relying heavily on Nasrallah, being shed of any support from the West and any support from the East. The Assad regime collapsed, and just to make sure, we destroyed 90% of their armaments of the army. And then improved a bit our positions, like taking the summit of the Hermon Mountain. It's a very beautiful place. To rescue Assad, and what they did was they wanted to send 1 or 2 airborne divisions to help him. And we stopped that. We sent some F-16s to some Iranian planes that were making some routes to Damascus. They turned back. He wasn't relying on his army. During the Civil War, every time he got into real trouble, Nasrallah would send thousands and thousands of fighters to help him. And now there was no one to send the fighters. So there was an opening, obviously, which Ashara used. They didn't understand how come they're coming in every place there's no one to fight. And they just kept moving from town to town with the full blessing, that's a diplomatic word, by Turkey.
So not only Israel, but also Turkey. Remember now what he said, with the full blessing, and that's a diplomatic word. And this is something that when I told you back then, guys, this operation in November 2024 was a joint Israeli-Turkish operation, of course, with the blessing of the United States. Many people were like, is it possible for Turkey and Israel to cooperate? Of course it is possible. And they do cooperate all the time. They have now a joint coordination room, basically, to cooperate and coordinate how to manage the affairs of Syria. And this office is in Azerbaijan, right? But I'm fearful of another scenario, guys. And this scenario is, of course, call it a conspiracy theory, but false flag operations are something very normal and natural, and they always happen in every war or precede any larger wars. And in this case, Donald Trump posted something ridiculous on his the True social media, blah, blah, that he owns. He says the US had nothing to do with the attack on Iran tonight. If we are attacked in any way, shape, or form by Iran, the full strength and might of the United States Armed Forces will come down on you at levels never seen before. However, we can easily get a deal done between Iran and Israel and end this bloody conflict. Of course, he's a big liar. And the United States was not only part of the consent, it was part of the planning and execution of it. And now it is part of defending Israel when the missiles are falling over Israel, right? So when he says, if we come under attack by Iran, we will strike them back or we will intervene directly. This is like when Obama in 2012 or 2013, he came and said, I'm going to set a red line in Syria, and this red line is going to be WMDs. If the Assad regime uses chemical weapons, then we will intervene directly. And this was like, amazing. It's like a very great thing to say for the regional intelligence apparatuses who are trying to find a way to urge the United States to intervene in Syria and bomb Syria back then. So this is basically a perfect excuse or the perfect thing for these intelligence apparatus to work on a false flag chemical attack in Syria and invite for an intervention by the United States. And this is what this is the direction that this could go to. And that is, if the US forces, personnel, or anyone come under attack, or even inside the United States, because all these MAGA mouthpieces, Trump bootlickers, and Israel bootlickers in the United States, mostly now what they call themselves, they claim to be conservatives. Anyways, there's so many of them in the United States nowadays, creating the illusion that because of the open border that they had with Mexico and with Latin America, Iran sent assets to the United States and they will carry terrorist attacks inside the United States. So if a terrorist attack happens in the United States, I would bet on my life that this is a false flag operation to urge to sell the war to the American public. But this has to be a major and very bloody terrorist attack. It's not like something like a car crash or somebody is driving a car and kills one or two persons. No. It's like a 9/11 level of terrorist attack, false flag terrorist attack on American soil that would change the public opinion in the United States for sure. If they blame on Iran, they would come after. This is what I think is going to happen. So in this case, we have a few White House officials, basically, they're denying the allegations of the mainstream media that Trump was completely on board and he only publicly opposed the Israeli attacks on Iran as a smokescreen to increase the odds of success. So the press is saying Trump is lying. He knew about it. He was part of the planning. He was part of the execution and plan. And Trump officials are saying this is fake news. We had no clue about it. We didn't want them to bomb Iran, etc., etc. And I think they are lying. I think American officials or Trump officials are lying. And we have to understand that the Americans are already part of this war. Like, it's not like whether or not they will intervene, they're already part of it. So our friend Brian Barletic, with great analysis always about the global geopolitical affairs, he says the US is already at war with Iran. it planned this attack, armed Israel over the course of months or longer, specifically for this war, provides logistical support as it takes place, is using regional assets to blunt Iran's retaliation, and most certainly plans to wait more directly when politically and strategically viable. Until then, as it is to the last Ukrainian in Eastern Europe versus Russia, it will be to the last Israeli, except don't forget, Israel has nuclear weapons, and the US would really like to absolve itself of responsibility if that is anywhere in the cards. Again, this is a US war already fought through Israel. The US is already involved. The only question is how many people realize it and how much more the US is willing to openly commit to it. By the way, on the other, in the same context, the US quietly delivered in the past few weeks hundreds of advanced laser-guided missiles to Israel, and well knowing that these projectiles would be used against Iran. The US also provided Israel with missiles, knowing that they've featured specifically armed Tel Aviv for surgical strikes inside Israel. And on Friday, Trump himself confirmed in remarks to Reuters that he and his team knew the attacks were coming. He said, quote, "We knew everything." Observers, meanwhile, noted that reports of Washington's unstinting arms support aimed at further equipping Israel to better target Iran have emerged despite the United States being engaged in indirect talks with Iran, ostensibly to give diplomacy a chance. There is, by the way, another player in the region, which I have discussed with our friend Ehsan Safarnajad from Iran. I will try to invite him back on Syriana Analysis next week to update us about the current situation inside Iran. But before that, if you remember that conversation with Ehsan, we spoke about Azerbaijan. And I said, Azerbaijan is probably the most important country for Israel bordering Iran, which they are using this territory for a long time as an advanced satellite and intelligence headquarters against Iran. And now we see many of the attacks against Iran are coming on the northern part of Iran, on the borders with Azerbaijan. And some reports claim that 2 or 3 drones were actually sent from Azerbaijani territories into Iran. So in this case, we have a lot of Israel has established drone bases, basically, some of which are in the Kurdistan, Iraqi Kurdistan region, and others are on Azerbaijani territories. And they're just sending drones from these places on Iranian targets. So now I'm coming to a topic that is very sensitive and very important for me and for many people, and that is Armenia. Now you would say, what has Armenia to do with this? I would say Armenians should be very worried and very terrified about Israel's war against Iran. I believe with 100% that if Iran is weakened or Iran loses this war, Armenians will lose the southern province of Syunik. And Turkey and Azerbaijan are not only watching, they're assisting Israel in this case. So for those who want to know the map of Armenia, I just want to show you the region of Syunik region, Armenia. So just for you to know what I'm talking about, because this is very important. So this is Syunik. Let's take a big map so we can understand what's happening. Syunik, just a second. Kodaik. So this is Syunik. Syunik region. So you see this map, guys, this red region? This is the region that Azerbaijan wants to occupy from Armenia. Why? Because between, I don't know why I cannot basically upload this picture, because it sends me to another page. Let's see if there is another. Anyways, so this region here, if you see, this is part of Azerbaijan, right? And this is part of Azerbaijan, and this is Turkey. And Turkey wants to open a corridor, basically, between Turkey and Azerbaijan. And Armenia is rejecting of doing that, and Iranians are rejecting of doing that. because this will change the entire trade routes in the region in favor of Turkey and Azerbaijan, something that both the Armenians and the Iranians do not want to see. So if the Iranians are weakened to a certain extent, or they lose this war basically against Azerbaijan, against Iran, against Israel, that automatically means that the Azeris will roll into this region and they will occupy it. So they open this corridor between Armenia and between Azerbaijan and Turkey. And this is not something that is my unique analysis, although I was one of the first people who spoke about this. I said, be careful of Azerbaijan. Be careful of Azerbaijan, guys. So one of the Iranian analysts, he is analyzing this case. He says, Azerbaijan is keen to occupy the Armenian province of Syunik to open a commercial and military corridor for it. And this serves the interests of the Zionist entity in cutting off Iran's land connection with Europe and Russia, taking into account Aliyev's game with the Israeli Mossad. So therefore, always when we see where these Azeris are doing military drills, they are already doing it near the borders with Syunik. And before that, they have occupied the Nagorno-Karabakh region from the Armenians because this was endorsed and backed by Israel. Endorsed and backed by Israel. Why would the Israelis support Azerbaijan to occupy a Christian Armenian land? Because when they do that, they will have an access, basically. Let me just show you what I'm talking about. They will have an access to more Iranian territories, because some of the territories on the borders between the former Nagorno-Karabakh and Iran were basically exactly on the borders. So what happened here is we had Israel supplying 60% of weapons to Azerbaijan in order to ethnically cleanse the Armenians. And then Haaretz basically says Israeli fingerprints are all over the ethnic cleansing in Nagorno-Karabakh. So just to show you the map of Nagorno-Karabakh. So before the war, or before Azerbaijan occupied basically these territories, this is how the situation was basically. So I'm just going to maybe, let's see if this one is correct. Yeah, this map should be okay. So let me show you this map, guys, just for us to understand what is going on. So the red is the region of Nagorno-Karabakh, and this grayish area was also occupied by the Armenians as a buffer. So as you see, this gray area was also in the hands of the Armenians, and they had their borders with Iran. And now once Azerbaijan occupied all this area, the gray and the red areas, they have extended their borders all the way here on the Iranian borders, and this is where the Israelis are building their smart villages. And I want to show you something, because the other day somebody said, "No, it's not there." So Israel smart village in Nagorno-Karabakh. So the other day somebody said, "Go learn this." You know, some people come and comment on my videos, say, do some research before saying this or that. So this is from the Middle East Monitor. It says, Azerbaijan, Israel minister visit smart village near Iranian border. Israel's agricultural minister, Oded Forer, visited the so-called smart village in Azerbaijan, just several kilometers from the Iranian borders, Ma'arif has reported. And the Iranian former president, Raisi, and Amir Abdullahian, they died 200 kilometers away from this smart village. So you do the math. Sometimes it is difficult, unfortunately, to explain everything. Sometimes it is, I don't know, some people are hot-headed, unfortunately. So we have now a situation where Iranian Parliament National Security Commission, so we have in Iran's parliament, you have a National Security Commission spokesperson saying that now is the best time to withdraw from the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Non-Proliferation Treaty is a treaty that Iran has signed and said that I don't want nukes. I will not develop nukes, and I will adhere to the international law. All of a sudden, the sun has shining to my face now, and that changes the the temperature of the video. It goes into more different colors. So if they change this situation, what would be the response of the Israelis, and why should the Israelis have nukes and not the Iranians, right? And this is funny because one of the Israeli politicians was asked about this case, whether or not they should have nukes and not the Israelis. The Israelis should have nukes and not the Iranians. Take a look what he said.
Why should the world tolerate you having nuclear weapons and not, say, Iran?
First, again, we never admitted to have such weapons. But the very comparison is, I must say, it's very insulting. And I tell you why.
Insulting.
We've suffered one Holocaust. We listen to our neighbors.
Is it because of the Holocaust that you should be allowed to have nuclear weapons?
You know what? This interview was finished now. Your attitude is so hostile, and your questions are so arrogant. I don't want to
Is
speak
it the
with you
case
anymore.
that
This attitude is so hostile. You're so anti-Semite for asking why Israel has nukes and why Iran doesn't have nukes. That's very hostile question. And it was imagine if the journalists, this Western journalists, treat Israeli officials the way they treat Iranian spokespersons or the Iranian officials. Yesterday, Mohammed Marandi, Dr. Mohammed Marandi, was a guest on our channel a few times. He was on Sky News. So on Sky News, this journalist of Sky News, of course, she's well trained to be basically a shield for the military-industrial complex, a shield for the empire, basically. They're soldiers for the empire, right? And they repeat and repeat and repeat the same narratives, and they tell the lie and lie and lie and lie, and they continue telling the lie until it is now normalized and until it is treated as a fact. So she hosted Marandi on Sky News yesterday, and this is the exchange which happened between the both sides. Take a look.
Professor Marandi, thank you very much for joining us here on the program. Did Iran majorly miscalculate? Because even now, President Trump is providing Iran with an off-ramp, telling them to come to the negotiating table. At what point will Iran take that offer?
Well, according to your narrative, Iran always miscalculates. It's a regime. I heard the regime 20 times in the last 10 minutes as I was listening. You sound like TASS news agency upgraded during the Soviet Union. And you say the regime is unpopular and is killing its people. When General Soleimani was murdered by the same Trump that you talk about, millions of people came to the streets of this city, Tehran, that I'm in. So how is it that he's so unpopular? This propaganda that you're producing is only justifying aggression. What the Israeli regime did was aggression. What it did was unjustified aggression. And Netanyahu has been saying for over 30 years, some say up to 40 years, he's been saying that Iran's on the verge of creating a nuclear weapon. And thanks to people like you, he gets away with these lies. But people can go online and check how many times he said.
Professor Marandi, if you could just focus on, I know your narrative.
Professor Marandi, could you just focus on the question? Like, I'm calling you guys regimes, dictatorships, that you deserve to be killed and enslaved and destroyed, and your nation should be completely annihilated and your civilization should demise. I'm saying all these things, but could you please focus on my question? This is what basically she's saying.
And I know the line you take, and we've spoken a number of times, and I'm sure, but if you could just focus on answering the question. In terms of the nuclear talks, on day 60, as far as we know, Donald Trump had said Iran has 60 days. Israel attacked on the 61st day. Can we talk a little bit about the regime's competence levels, the intelligence and security, the competence of your intelligence and security agencies, the fact that Mossad was able to build drone sites in your country, the fact that the leadership was asleep in their beds when they were struck and that you ignored these warnings. Can we talk a little bit about the fact that the regime was taken completely by surprise and top leaders have now been decapitated and killed as a result of the Israeli attack?
Saying regime, I think it helps you contain your contempt for independent countries. You after all, you work for Sky News. It's understandable. But the regime, how do you know that the Israeli regime had bases inside Iran? You're just repeating their propaganda. Of course, Israel for you is not a regime. Sorry, it's a state. but it's a genocidal state carrying out extermination in Gaza, but that's not really important. How do you know
So are you
that they
denying
have
that the
bases
top
inside
commanders
Iran?
are being killed?
No, he's not denying that. He's saying, how do you know if, like, how do you know that Israel smuggled or has made bases inside Iran? Because Israel claimed that they have smuggled drones inside Iran. How does she know that there is a base inside Iran firing these drones against the Iranian targets? How does she know? She's just saying what the Israelis are claiming, right? I'm not saying that's false. I'm just saying that she doesn't know. She's just repeating what the Israelis are saying. And she's just coming back with another hit against Marandi saying, so are you denying that officials were killed? That's not what he said. That's not what he said.
Are you denying the top commanders were killed?
Oh, so you mean what you're referring to basically is an attack, an act of aggression, that they suddenly fire missiles at civilian targets at apartment buildings and slaughter people in those apartment buildings, slaughtering whole families. For you, that's targeting. That's a really sophisticated act.
But if I can just ask, have military facilities been hit? Have nuclear facilities been hit?
One of the buildings that had some of these commanders, one or two of these commanders, was a large apartment building where they killed everyone, 60 people, 20 children. That's not important for people like you, but that's important for people like us. For you, people like you who support ethno-supremacism and the chosen people being able to slaughter and exterminate
Professor
Palestinians.
Marandi, I'm just trying to get the perspective. We're trying to give you airtime so that you can give us.
And this is the thing with these mainstream journalists. We're giving you a favor. Like, we're giving you our airtime to explain you. Like, they think that they're doing some favor. Like, they always come from this position. Like, look, this is Sky News. I'm giving you an opportunity to explain your position. No, I mean, Marandi doesn't have to go on Sky News, by the way. Like, I've been invited recently to many news outlets, and I don't want to go. I have my own platform. I can say whatever I want. He has to do the same thing, in my opinion. It's just fruitless to go to Sky News and other channels and try to have a conversation with them. These people are just not interested to have a conversation with you. They're not interested. They're interested in creating a narrative. They're interested in interrupting you while you speak. They're interested in injecting certain terminologies in the narrative. They're interested in creating narratives. This is their job. They do prostitution. And I respect the prostitutes way more, those who sell their bodies in exchange for money, way more than the prostitutes, because the prostitutes do not kill anyone. But these journalists cover the crimes and the crime scenes of the psychopathic sociopaths all around the world. This is their job. What they do is worse than what any prostitute could ever do. There is not even a comparison, right?
The Iranian perspective on this, and we want to know, and I want to understand Iran's position here. Will you come to the negotiating table now? Donald Trump, after these series of airstrikes and this attack was launched, called on Iran to come back to the negotiating table. As the spokesperson of the regime, or as someone who worked closely with the negotiating team, do you believe they will come to the negotiating table now?
Look at the stupid question.
Well, your regime should know, and your news agency or your TV channel should know better. We were at the negotiating table. It was Trump that conspired with Netanyahu to attack Iran. This is how you twist the truth. You shouldn't invite me because you're easily exposed. Iran was negotiating. Initially, Trump had one position, and so did Witkoff. And then they flipped and said no enrichment. And then they continued the negotiations. And the night before the attack, Trump said that we don't want war. And then after the attack, he said, we're all for it. And you're saying Iran? Is Iran going to come back to the negotiating table? The audacity. Come on. Be a bit, show at least a bit of integrity. A bit of integrity will help.
Okay. Okay, Professor Marandi, thanks again for joining us here on the...
Thanks again for joining us again. That's hilarious. One of the haters of Marandi says, I don't know, he sounds gay, something like this I saw. Mohammad Marandi, by the way, whether you agree with him or not, he served in the military and fought against Saddam Hussein in the 80s, and he came under chemical attack, and he survived. So I'm sure he's less gayer than you, whoever is making this comment. I'm sure you cannot even hold a gun in your hands, and you're just here on YouTube being a keyboard warrior. Anyways, one last video I want to show you guys. And before I show you that, today's live streaming is exceptionally successful. We have around 1,900 people watching this live stream only on YouTube. We have also Rumble. I have to say hello to all the viewers of Syriana Analysis also on Rumble and on Ganjin World, those who watch and follow the streams of Syriana Analysis. If you're liking these streams, guys, and the analysis and commentaries I'm making, I would really appreciate it only if you hit the like button, because it helps me to navigate through the algorithms of YouTube, and subscribe to this YouTube channel, because by subscription, this content also reaches to a wider audience. And while you're at it, like, or around 2,000 people are watching this, it would be a great help to me if you subscribe to this YouTube channel. Finally, guys, there is one talking head in the United States, and I don't really have any, let's say, negative sentiments towards him, but I will criticize his arguments, right? And one of these people is PBD, this Public Pat David. And Public Pat David, in my opinion, like, he holds like a PhD in word salad, you know? Like, you could watch Patrick Pat David on his podcast, or if he's giving a speech or something, and he could speak for hour and a half by himself, right? Give him a microphone and this guy speaks as long as you want. But could you really learn something from him? Like, watching him, especially when he speaks about global geopolitical issues, he could give you a lecture about the entire Middle East conflict, but you would not learn anything from him. So he could speak as long as he wants without giving any meaningful analysis or something that the people can benefit. It feels or gives the impression that his speech is directed to dumb audience. This is what I want to say. And the proof of that is this video that he posted yesterday on his own podcast. He says, Patrick Bet-David says Iran always been the chaos master in the Middle East, not Israel.
As a person that was born in Iran, yes.
He always has to say, as a person who was born in Iran, right? Like, this guy was born in Iran, and he left Iran when he was 9 years old. Please, guys, if you're 9 years old, do you remember anything about global geopolitics or regional geopolitics? Who is in his mind was able to, at 9 years old, was able to differentiate between what is right and what is wrong when it came to the geopolitical issues? And are you really like mature enough to even understand how your country operated or other countries operated? I'm not defending Iran here. I'm just saying this guy weaponizes that birth, like, by chance he was born in Iran and now I am an expert on Iran. You have to listen to me, because my understanding is perfect, not only about Iran, but also beyond Iran. He's like, he can explain to you Syria, he can explain to you Iran, he can explain to you Palestine. Like, he knows about everything. He knows about business, he knows about social relationship, he knows about everything. Like, he doesn't have like a niche to focus. He's just an expert about everything. And that doesn't make any sense to me, especially when it comes to Iran. You cannot claim to be an expert on Iran just because you were born in Iran and lived there for 9 years. Just like some experts claim to be experts on Syria because they visited Syria for 5 days, like this Charles Lister, who I call him Charles Lobster, and then other experts who married a Syrian all of a sudden became experts on Syria. That doesn't make any sense, right? Being an expert requires studying the case and reading through the texts, the books, the documents, the history, context, everything. But someone like PBD, because he loves Reza Pahlavi and he wants to bring back monarchy, basically. How can you be claim to be a Democrat? I'm not saying because he's a Republican anyways, but like somebody who likes democratic system and then support someone like Reza Pahlavi. This guy is like, who is this guy? He's he's in a CIA payroll. He lives in California. He's probably sniffing coke all the time, and then he's the next leader. Like his father or whoever when they brought him in 1953. How did they come to power? CIA and MI6, they did a coup in Iran in 1953, and they ousted Mossadegh back then. And he was democratically elected because he wanted to nationalize the oil of Iran. And then they brought a monarchy. And this led into the Islamic Revolution in 79. So if you don't give context, you're just lying to your audience. And one of these liars is, of course, PBD in this case. So it's not about, and there is something crazy, like he mentions here. Take a listen.
I can't stand this regime. Yes, they've called, the only thing that's been persistent and consistent is the following. When the Shah was in Iran, did Israel already exist?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes or no?
Mm-hmm.
Was Israel causing chaos? Was there war in the Middle East?
Was there a war in the Middle East, guys, when the Shah was the king of Iran? Could you please let me know in the comments below before we continue with this uneducated person?
Let me say this one more time. When Iran was ran by the Shah, what year was the Shah of Iran? What years did he run Iran?
53 through 79. I think.
Okay, 53 is the oil consortium. So 54 is the oil consortium. 41 to 79.
Oh, wow.
Because he started at 21 years old, young man, right? 41 to 79. When did Israel become a nation?
48.
Yeah.
Okay, so check this out. Why is it that between 48 to 79, while the Shah was the king of Iran, running Iran, why is it for 31 years there is no major war in the Middle East?
Guys, can you believe that he said that? Can you believe that he said, why is it when the Shah was the leader of Iran and Israel existed back then, there was no major war in the Middle East? And you know what's the problem? The problem is not that he mentioned that. The problem is, like, look, sometimes I say things on my podcast, and then after the podcast, when I watch it back, I'm like, oh shit, like I made a mistake somewhere, right? It happens. But I don't come and I take this, what I said as a mistake, something I was mistaken, right? I don't post it as a short video on my social media account showcasing the people how idiot I am because I was wrong. But this guy doesn't even feel that he made a mistake. And that's the problem. Like, first of all, I mocked him. I said, tell us again how your 9-year life as a kid in Iran has shaped your entire geopolitical understanding of the Middle East and beyond. Now, the truth of the matter is, he's of course wrong, right? So there were so many wars led and started, initiated by Israel during this time. Like in 1948, there was the Israel-Arab War, which led into the Nakba, and 700,000 Palestinians were expelled from their homeland. In 56, Egypt was invaded by Israel, the UK, and France. In 67, Egypt and Syria and Palestinian territories were invaded by Israel. Between 1967 and 1970, there was a war of attrition against Egypt by, again, Israel. And in 73, there was an offensive. This was by Egypt and Israel and Syria, against Israel to liberate the territories they lost in 67 war. I mean, even Grok, which is a pro-Israeli AI search engine, somebody asked, hey, Grok, compared to Israel and Iran, who has instigated and invaded and started more wars? He says, comparing Israel and Iran on who has instigated, invaded, and started more wars is complex. Israel has directly initiated several conflicts, including 1956 Suez Crisis, 1967 Six-Day War, 1982 Lebanon War, totaling at least 6 major military actions. Iran, however, has not directly started wars since 1979. With the Iran-Iraq War between 1980 and 88 was initiated by Iraq. So, what do you say to someone like him? It's crazy. Posting this on your X account, despite knowing that this is wrong. Like, don't they have producers? This is something crazy, because people like him have a massive following. Millions of people watch him in the United States, and this is the guy educating them. This is the guy that educating them, who is educating them. It's disgusting for me. For such people have such big platforms and they spew such blatant lies that is very easily debunkable, but because they're talking to dumb people, this is what they think. They're treating their audience as dumb people. They don't respect them. That's the problem. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in to today's special stream. Today is Sunday, 15th of June, 2025. Tomorrow on Monday, I'm going to do, of course, another live streaming at 5 p.m. Central European Time, 11 a.m. Eastern American Time. If you like this stream, kindly ask you to hit the like button, subscribe to this YouTube channel, And if you like to support the independent journalistic work I'm doing, I don't have any sponsors. I don't have a I don't have team at all, basically. I'm by myself. I'm not a PBD at the end of the day. However, I truly believe that I am giving you quality work and quality analysis, unlike someone like PBD. So if you like to support this work, there are different means in the description below, guys, and I will see you tomorrow. I wish you a beautiful rest of a weekend. Peace be upon you, upon your families. Salam.